Hey, right, I'm not really in the mood for making this video, but I have to say this is probably one of the most significant videos that I will ever make. If you drive a motor car or you ride a motorcycle, this video is important to you because in the very, very near future, in fact less than a year, motoring on the roads as you know it is going to change beyond all recognition. Actually, I'll rephrase that. Changes beyond all recognition are going to start within the next 12 months. Now, I know we have a lot of people with a very short attention span, so I'll say this now before we get into it. If you're not a car driver and you just ride motorcycles, as soon as you hear certain facts being disclosed, you're going to switch off and say, well, you know, it doesn't affect motorcycles, so I don't need to worry about it. And if you live in the States or Australia or New Zealand, you're probably going to think, well, this is the UK and Europe only, so I don't need to worry about it. Well, I'll tell you now, in both cases, you better pay attention. Because like it or not, irrespective of what you drive and where you live, this is going to affect you. I would say within the next 5 years, 10 years at the absolute outside. Now, this is not a new thing. I think over the last 20 years it's reared its head about 3 times in various parts of the world. One of the factors that held it back was technology, because although the bare bones were there, it wasn't a perfect technology. There were some major hurdles to overcome before it could be implemented. And the other reason was a democratic one, because this type of legislation was not going to be popular in the free world. And if you introduce unpopular legislation, you don't get voted in again. That's how democracy works. You're there to implement the will of the people that voted you in. So this type of legislation would be political suicide. And the legislation that I'm talking about is legislation that the EU has implemented to begin in the summer of next year, 2022. Now, for the moment, this only pertains to private light goods. So, cars, vans and trucks. HGVs have been fitted with speed limiters for quite some time, but as of next year, any new vehicle introduced to the market must have this technology fitted. Now, there's a distinction here between new cars and new models. If it's an existing model that's already in production, even though it's new, it doesn't necessarily have to have this technology fitted. But from next summer, any new vehicles or new models introduced to the market will have to have it fitted. And all motor cars, vans, light goods will have to have this technology fitted irrespective of that by a predetermined date in 2024. Now, I should make it clear this will be for new vehicles only. It's not retrospective. You don't have to take your 10-year-old Ford Escort in and have it retrofitted with this system. This law will only apply to brand new vehicles that are registered on or after those dates. So I think for the most part, you're going to see it trickling in on new vehicle sales before 2024. But this legislation and the technology that it's introducing is not just going to be a governor that stops you going over 70 miles an hour on the motorway. It's much more big brother than that. By means of cameras and GPS, it is going to control your speed irrespective of what road you're travelling on. The system has to be capable of reading speed limits on road signs, and assisted by GPS data, it will stop you from exceeding the limit in a 30 mile an hour limit, a 40 mile an hour limit, a 50, a 60 or a 70. Now, initially, and the EU have stressed that this is only a temporary measure, you will have the ability to switch these systems off. However, the system will reset whenever you switch off and switch the ignition back on again. So you can't disable it permanently. The EU says that this is to encourage public or citizen uptake, if you like. I think what that really means is that they've introduced the ability to temporarily disable it in order to cut back on public backlash, because there is going to be a backlash. And then once everyone's calmed down about it, they'll just remove that ability quietly through legislation, and the first you'll know about it is when you buy a new car and find you can't disable it. Now, the EU has also stipulated with these systems that they can be overridden, which is different to disabling them. I.e., if you're in a 30 mile an hour zone, once you reach 30 mile an hour, if you continue to press on the accelerator, power will be reduced and it simply won't go any faster unless you persist with the accelerator, in which case the car will allow you to have your own way and go faster, effectively breaking the speed limit. Now, before you breathe a sigh of relief, unfortunately they've stipulated that the car must have what they call nagging systems fitted, and this should be in the form of either a haptic feedback through the accelerator, which effectively means the accelerator will push back at your foot to remind you to slow down, and or audio visual cues to tell you that you need to slow down. Basically, it's just going to nag you until you let it have its own way and you slow the vehicle down. And the worst of it, I'm afraid, is yet to come, because all of these cars and vehicles fitted with this system will also have a telemetry recording device fitted, which will record and store everything you do, including incidents of breaking the speed limit, which of course can then be used to prosecute you. And I would imagine that they've done this in order to stop people from overriding or disabling the systems. They're encouraging them to leave them on in order to safeguard the licenses. Now, this is not science fiction, this is science fact, and it's coming to the roads near you starting next year. And of course the EU don't have to worry about a democratic pushback on this, because the EU is not a democratic political organisation. Miss von der Leyen and her closest associates were not democratically voted in, they were simply handed the job on a plate. And there is, I'm afraid, no mechanism within the European Union to remove them if they're naughty. So they are, of course, able to implement laws like this with complete impunity. So how does this affect you if you don't live within the European Union and you're a motorcyclist? Well, within the last few days, the UK government has announced that it will be adopting this system within the timescales issued by the European Union. So yes, if you live in the UK, this is going to affect you from next year too. Motorcycles, for the moment, have been given a reprieve, but the reasons they've given for that reprieve is merely that the existing technology needs to be adapted for motorcycles. It's not quite ready yet, but rest assured, they will have their top men working on it right now. They can't afford not to. As it stands, this situation where motor cars are affected but motorcycles are not affected creates a state of inequality. A state of inequality that will not be tolerated for long by the population at large. So they will implement something, and they will implement it sooner rather than later. I fear that this is the death knell for the large capacity, high powered motorcycle. There's simply going to be no point in them anymore, which probably explains Royal Enfield's strategy for small to medium capacity motorcycles, because once they start to put measures in place, there's going to be absolutely no point in them. Not that there's an awful lot of point in them now. They have announced that this is coming into force next summer, but as it stands, these are still draft papers. So it's anyone's guess what is going to be included in that legislation once it's released. They may well, as yet, implement some legislation regarding the use of motorcycles. It remains to be seen. Whichever way you look at it, it's coming for us bikers, and it's coming soon. Now, the reason that the UK government has said that it's also going to implement this new legislation is important, and it's important to the rest of the world as well. Part of the reason is because we've only just come out of the European Union. Our laws are very much intertwined with theirs. The other reason that they've given is manufacturing difficulties, and this is the important one for everybody. The Euro emissions standard has been adopted by most of the free world, simply because if you want to sell your motor vehicles to the European Union, they have to conform to their standards. And the European emissions standards are so integral to the fabric of the vehicles that it doesn't make sense having separate manufacturing lines for compliant and non-compliant vehicles. It's cheaper, it makes more business sense just to build one model that applies to all markets. And the UK government has cited this as being one of the reasons that we're going to adhere to it. And this, of course, applies in exactly the same way to European manufactured vehicles sold and exported in the open market. Because if you live in the States or Australia, from 2024, any motor car that you buy is going to have this technology built into it, irrespective of where it's made, which will of course leave the doors wide open for your governments to adopt similar legislation without any blame or public backlash, because your vehicles are already going to be fitted with these countermeasures. Car manufacturers have already complained that it's not going to be possible to make separate versions of these vehicles for separate markets, because these systems are once again going to be so integral to the manufacture of each individual model. It is, I'm afraid, the insidious nature of the European Union. Now, I've always presented this channel as being a responsible motorcyclist channel, and to be honest, in essence, I don't have a problem with speed limiters. I think anything that makes our roads safer and, if you like, forces beta personalities to be more responsible is a good thing. What I do have a problem with is an electronic grass sitting somewhere inside my car recording everything that I do, which potentially enable law enforcement agencies to pull you over, plug your car into a laptop, and potentially prosecute you for any transgressions that may come up on the vehicle's data log. And this could potentially, if these kind of powers come into force, affect you with the vehicle that you currently own. Yesterday I took my Mini in for its first service. I've had the car 2 years, but the first service is at the 2-year interval. The lady asked for my key fob because it's a keyless ignition on the car, and she sat it in what looked like a sort of phone charging cradle, and within seconds she was able to tell me how much fuel I had in my car, how many miles the car had done, when I last checked my tyre pressures, where and when I'd opened the bonnet, and I doubt very much that was the limit of the information that was available to her. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that countries that adopt this type of legislation, where this technology is already present on your modern vehicle that you own now, a simple free of charge firmware update on your ECU while you have it in for servicing could potentially allow them to fit this spy box in your car or motorcycle, and there won't be anything you can do about it. As I said earlier on, this is not science fiction, this is science fact, and it's probably already in your vehicle now, especially if you have a GPS system fitted. And this is, of course, just the first step to fully autonomous motor vehicles. This is, if you like, a sort of a pilot scheme, where the choice of the ability to drive your own vehicle is going to be taken away from you altogether. I think George Orwell, in his book 1984, got it pretty much right. He just got the dates wrong. It wasn't 1984. it was 2024. Remember, you heard it here first. Once again, thank you so much for watching this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you would perhaps leave a like and subscribe to this channel if you're not already a subscriber. I am of course going to be back next Friday, and it will hopefully be with something a little bit more cheerful than today's video. So until then, please, while you have a choice, ride safely, and I'll see you soon.